This video is sponsored by the Marvel Dice Throne expansion pack. More on that later on in the video. A classical director with a Shakespearean focus, two young actors, a pair of blonde eyebrows, and a character whose history spans both Marvel and Norse mythology. Hi, I'm Pat Whalen with yet another MCU podcast, and this is Everything You Should Know, Thor. Thank you to Marvel Dice Throne for sponsoring today's video. Marvel Dice Throne is a fast and fun board game fit for all ages. Whether you're just looking for an exciting game date night, a fun family challenge, or to take on your own Avengers team of board game enthusiasts, Marvel Dice Throne is right for everyone. Each player selects one of 8 heroes to face off in head-to-head battles to see who earns the right to take the throne. Gameplay involves strategically rolling dice to activate special abilities, playing unique hero cards to manipulate results, and upgrading your hero board to power your stats. Marvel Dice Throne is a game you're going to want to return to over and over again. Not only will you want to play as all 8 characters, including Loki, Scarlet Witch, Miles Morales, and Captain Marvel, you're also going to want to master each character's special skills and strategy to see how they fare against their opponents. You can support Marvel Dice Throne on Kickstarter today and reserve your copy. Check the link in the description to head over to Marvel Dice Throne Kickstarter right now and get rolling to see who takes the throne. In the post-credits tag of 2010's Iron Man 2, we see S.H.I.E.L.D. Special Agent Phil Coulson, played by Clark Gregg, drive up to a crater in New Mexico, bustling with activity. As he calls his boss, Nick Fury, to report on the discovery, the camera lingers on a massive, ornate hammer lodged into the ground. By the time this film, the 4th in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, began production, Marvel Studios had gotten pretty good at the whole film production thing. The formula was simple. Each film introduces a new hero, the audience follows this hero through their origin story, and tying it all together are a few actors crossing over from the other MCU films. It helped establish not only the timeline, but also the overall tone. The 3 prior films, Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, and Iron Man 2, were all commercial successes, and Marvel was on a roll, ready to capitalize on fans' interest in the series. Along with the commercial success came critical applause, most notably for how the films blended the real world with the characters from the comic books. 2011's Thor would challenge that and begin pushing the MCU into the colorful, poppy world we now know. Marvel's Thor was created by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee in Journey into Mystery number 83. Using Norse mythology as a base, Kirby and Lee developed a superheroized version of the universe. Kirby was the driving force. His interest in mythology sparked a creative renaissance. He would develop much of the world building in the back matter material of the original Journey into Mystery and Thor comic books. In these comics, Thor Odinson is banished to Earth, his spirit incarnated in the body of disabled medical student Donald Blake. When Blake tapped his walking stick on the ground, he transformed into the mighty Thor, wielding the powerful hammer Mjolnir.
Mjolnir? What's Mjolnir?
Thor was one of the founding members of the Avengers, when the group of heroes banded together to fight his brother Loki. When Thor wasn't saving the Earth, he was in his homeland of Asgard fighting mythological villains or facing off against conniving relatives. A little bit different than the industrialist playboy Tony Stark or the gamma radiation experiment gone wrong that is Bruce Banner. What helped make the character work in the comics was the shared creators. The Marvel way of storytelling was for the writer, usually Stan Lee, to provide a brief outline of the story. The artist would then fill in the details and the writer would follow up, providing story detail through dialogue. Lee, Kirby, Steve Ditko, John Romita Sr., among others, were all working on several books at the same time and constantly sharing ideas in the Marvel bullpen. The MCU was looking to copy this formula. Instead of Lee or Kirby, they had producer Kevin Feige take a more active role. It was his job to shepherd along the project. In the early 90s, Sam Raimi actually pitched a film starring the Norse god to Marvel. He ultimately passed on the idea only to revisit the potential project later in the decade. This is a common theme as various projects with language in production hell until the formation of Marvel Studios. In 2006, Mark Protasevich was hired to write the script for Thor. Matthew Vaughn was brought on a year later to direct when he basically rewrote much of Protasevich's script, cutting the proposed budget in half to get to the necessary $150 million mark. Following the success of Iron Man 2, Marvel gave Thor an official release date of June 2010. Unfortunately, Matthew Vaughn's holding contract had expired and he had moved on to other projects, namely Kick-Ass. A search was on to find a new director. Guillermo del Toro was approached to direct as he was a fan of the character, but passed, deciding instead to direct the Hobbit films, which never happened either. DJ Caruso, who had done mostly television work, held meetings on the position with Marvel. But it was in December 2008 when Marvel tapped Kenneth Branagh to direct the project. The actor-director was most known for adapting several Shakespearean plays to the big screen, including Henry V, Much Ado About Nothing, and As You Like It. Branagh's Shakespearean knowledge was perfect for adapting the story of Thor. He even called it a human story right in the center of a big epic scenario. You see, as much of the film's plot was that of fish out of water, Thor trying to survive without his powers after being banished to Earth, the story was and continues to be about brothers fighting for their father's approval. On one side you had Thor, a hotshot warrior born for the throne. Where he held great fighting prowess, he lacked humility. On the other side was Loki, who constantly lived in his adopted brother's shadow. In the background, he manipulated the actions of those around him in an attempt to meet his ultimate goal. Branagh even drew upon Shakespeare in describing his lead characters, saying, Prince Hal in Henry IV play is as reckless as Thor is in the brutish beginnings of our film. In Henry IV, you have Hotspur as a rival. Here we have Loki. Also in Hamlet and Henry V, conflicts may change whole nations. And so it is in Thor. The universe is at stake if Thor gets it wrong. He was able to make the unfamiliar familiar by drilling into the essence of the human conflict. It helped that Branagh had read the comics as a kid. His job now was to bridge the real world with the fantastical Asgard, and in doing so, bridge the previously grounded MCU with the potential colorful future of new stories and characters. Principal photography began in January 2010, and the release date was shifted to May 2011. Casting Thor was a complicated process featuring a who's who of Hollywood stars. Daniel Craig was offered the role, though he declined in order to focus on the James Bond franchise. Charlie Hunnam, Alexander Skarsgård, wrestler Triple H, Kevin McKidd, and Joel Kinnaman all tested for the lead role. Though he would eventually win the part, Chris Hemsworth was initially denied a look. It was only after he was filming Cabin in the Woods with future Avengers director Joss Whedon and had found a new agent did he receive a second chance. Funny enough, Chris's brother and future Hunger Games star Liam actually tested for the part as well. Hemsworth almost passed on the role, viewing the six-picture deal as too daunting. This would become a common thread for early Marvel projects. They would hire unknown or up-and-coming actors and sign them on the cheap for multiple films. Tom Hiddleston, who also had auditioned for the role of Thor at Branagh's request, was instead cast as the villainous Loki. I would love to see a multiverse in Season 2 of Loki, where Hiddleston is actually the Thor of that universe. The chemistry between Hemsworth and Hiddleston pops off the screen to this day. Yet another example of how lucky Marvel got with its early casting. In addition to Hemsworth and Hiddleston, the cast included Natalie Portman as Jane Foster, Stellan Skarsgård as Dr. Eric Selvig, Clark Gregg returns as S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Phil Coulson, Kat Dennings as lab assistant Darcy, Idris Elba as Heimdall, the Guardian of Asgard, Rene Russo and Anthony Hopkins as the rulers of Asgard, Frigga and Odin, and Jeremy Renner even makes an appearance as future Avenger Hawkeye. We will see all of these characters again in future chapters. Thor premiered in theaters on May 6, 2011 with an opening weekend box office of $65 million. It was far below the $129 million of Iron Man 2, but above the $55 million The Incredible Hulk recorded. It was enough to keep the Marvel train moving, especially with a worldwide gross of nearly $450 million. Through the rest of the MCU, the Thor film series would go through the most changes. Many films who are looking back on the film will argue the adaptation didn't work, but that's simply the wrong way to think about it. Thor did what it needed to do. Introduce the world of Asgard and connect it to the grounded reality we had seen in the prior three films. Kenneth Branagh and the cast of Thor did just that. Before I go, I'll leave you with a couple recommendations to fill up your comic book shelf. First, Thor Epic Collection, The God of Thunder, which collects the early run by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Second, Thor Volume 1 by J. Michael Straczynski and Olivier Coipel. And finally, The Mighty Thor by Matt Fraction, with art also by Coipel. For more details, you can check out our recommended reading episode at ForgottenEntertainment.com or right here on the Yamp YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you learned something new in this look back at Marvel's Thor. Let us know in the comments below if we missed anything and what your favorite part of the first Thor film might be. Thanks again to Marvel Dice Throne for sponsoring today's video. Remember to check out the link in the description to support their Kickstarter. As always, I'm Pat Whalen with yet another MCU podcast from Forgotten Entertainment. We'll see you next time.